All right. Hey, Nick, I wanted to talk to you today about a topic I absolutely love with analytics. I've been working on this a lot in my career, and that is recruiting source cost analytics. And so I want to show
Sounds
you,
good.
yeah, I want to show you a little bit of what you can do in one model around that, and then kind of pick your brain on it. I think something that is surprising to me, I think, is very rarely do I see people incorporating their recruiting source costs into their recruiting analytics. And I think it's just absolutely a quick win. It's something my argument would be that everybody should be doing it. And I know you're just in the process of having a shot of espresso. So I figure this is the perfect time to run you through
This
that.
is it. I'm
Yeah,
ready.
exactly. To take you through it. So yeah, I'll kind of show you what I've been working on here. And then along the way, I'll share my screen here, kind of pitch you on just this idea that I think this makes sense. You know, you and I talk a lot about if you're starting your people analytics program, where should you get started? And I like to think about the kind of analyses that are going to kind of minimize the problems you have to work through and then maximize some of that value you can get early. You want that quick win. And I just think that recruiting source costs fit like squarely right in the middle of that. So,
Yeah, and I think from you kind of educating me on this topic more, since you have more experience than I do on the recruiting analytics piece, is that so much of this data isn't that difficult
mhm.
to source. So in terms of quick wins and things like that, it's something that most organizations can easily capture.
Yeah, exactly. And not only is it, and I'm going to show you how easy it can be to get. So not only is it easy to get, but then at the same time, often in people analytics, you have challenges around data sensitivity and things like that. You're analyzing your workforce by attributes that are potentially sensitive. This avoids a lot of those problems too, because you're going to look more, just at applications per spend, the amount of you spend and how many hires you get. You're kind of avoiding a lot of the personal data that might otherwise be sensitive. You're also showing that your people analytics program can speak that language of finance and dollars and cents. We talked a little bit about finance last week. We'll probably talk more about it in the future. And then again, I get really excited at just how simple the underlying data can be. So did my screen come up? Can you see this all right?
Yeah, it's here.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to walk you through these visuals quickly. I don't need to take all of your coffee break here, Nick. But the other thing I want to just talk about is, to get at some of these analyses. So we'll build that up to say cost per application. We'll keep it simple. We'll just do cost per application. Cost per hire is, I think, a better metric. But right now in your applicant tracking system, you've probably got some summary data on the number of applications you get from a given source. Like this used to be a struggle 5, 10 years ago. By now, you should have that data. And if you already have that data, put together just a spreadsheet as I was building out these analyses of just how minimal that data can be that you then load in to kind of add this whole ROI layer on top of your recruiting data. And I kind of boiled it down to just if it's right now, it's 2021, and you wanted to look back and do an analysis on 2020, you could literally get a legal pad and walk around and figure out how much you spent, roughly speaking on Indeed, how much you spent on LinkedIn, and just an annual amount for starters would be fine. You can track it in a more nuanced way down the road. But if you just start here, this I actually tested in a text file. This is half a kilobyte of data. Like in terms of data efficiency, if you can muster this, you can pull it together, then you can add this into your recruiting mix and just show some really cool analytics on top of it. Does that make sense so far, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, here's the challenging part. If you're going to make a lot of value, build a lot of value on top of such a small data set, getting the calculations right to power that analysis is what can get kind of tricky. So that's what I'm going to walk you through on this first row here, which is all I have done in this first table is I have 2020, and I've just loaded in the exact same costs from that spreadsheet, right? But we talked last week about the value of data modeling. Now, if we talk a little bit about the value of having like a calculation engine that sits on top of your data, if you look in the upper right, what I have for a drill down example is I just took LinkedIn's costs out of that. So for 2020, it was 18,000, spent a little bit in 2021 as well. But what you need to be able to do is to then allocate that cost out down to the day level. So you can roll it up in different ways, like we talked about last week. So what I can do now is I can drill in on 2020, and I can see it out, spread out by quarter. right? And quarters have actually different numbers of days, calendar quarters. So the number's a little bit different. If I drill down into 2020, I can see January, February, March. February is lower. February has fewer days. And if I actually go down to the day level, you can see that the kind of, it's taking that one row of data and it's applying it across every day and giving me my daily spend through that whole period. And it's just doing it on the fly. So I don't have to actually like create rows of data and things like that for that analysis. So give that a second. But is that making sense to you, Nick? Maybe.
Yep.
All right. Now, the fun part I love too, I love 2020 February too, because there's all sorts of little wrinkles in here. Happen to be a leap year, right? So just knowing there's 29 days in February, allocating my $49 that I'm spending looks like about one post per day, you know, out across all of that time, right? So once I get to that point, now what I can do without any additional heavy lifting and taking that kilobyte of data and spreading it out around my other recruiting outcomes is I can just take those costs and I can add in my applications from those sources next to it. So I know what that source is giving me per month, per day, whatever. I can connect my recruiting source costs to it. I can show them side by side, or more likely just calculate that ratio out. So as I've done on the lower right now is, you know, Indeed.com, I'm spending about $2 per application. Monster, I'm spending about $7 per application. It's demo data. Don't get mad at Glassdoor or Indeed when you look at this data set. And, you know, again, extending this out to hires would also be like really interesting because you might spend a lot per application, but the quality is great. So it's worth spending that, right? So now take that little bit of data, spread it out across the days, and now I'm enriching my results and I can see what I'm spending per application. Still tracking me?
Yeah, definitely. And then is the idea of splitting it out by days, is that going to be because eventually we would connect the hires on their days of hire, so they'd be placed into the right part of the data, the time model inside the data? Is that's the point of having this kind of allocated out? It's averaging it, but it will be slotted to a hire on a specific date.
Exactly. And this is where now the time aspect of recruiting always gets really interesting, right? Because in this sense, what you'd want to do is take that hire, connect them back to their application, and then look at the month in which that application came in. Yep. So if I spent $10,000 on Indeed in 1 month, I might hire the people 2 months later. Maybe I have a really long process, but I really want to align the spend and the output that I got from Indeed. And that's another thing you can do really nicely down in the data model is you can flag like the winning applications, so to speak, and see when they came in. So yeah, that's another good point. It's one of the things that can make recruiting data a little more complicated, but definitely you will see that certain sources pay off in cost per hire, even if they look a little bit underperforming in cost per application. If the quality is there, you're going to get good value.
Right.
Cool. Now there's one more view. You kind of inspired this with your comment earlier. So I did put it together and mix it in here. So I've got my cost per application. I can sort those and I can see which sources perform well, which sources don't perform so well. The other thing we could do is just scatter them out. There's so many reasons I love this data. I love that it's ROI driven. I love that it's pretty minimal data. You get a lot of value. It also lends itself to a scatter plot, which is great. Anytime you can make a good scatter plot, that's fun to include. So I basically took each of those sources and plotted them here. Across the bottom, there's how much I'm spending on those sources, and it's all of 2020 right now. And then up at the top, it's my output variable from that, how many applications I got. And then, just some fun things we can do in one model here. It's not the most scientific use of a line of best fit, but I can just turn that on from kind of our data science package. And this tells me that, yes, generally speaking, if I spend more money, I do get more applications in return.
Which is a good thing.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it would be a shame if that line went the other direction, or it'd be an opportunity for somebody. The other thing, though, that does is it kind of gives me this like quick calculation of what's the expected payoff. If I take my sources, what's my line of best fit through them? And I can see which sources are kind of dynamically falling above or below that line.
Yeah, right? That's the part I really like about this. I mean, you have two that are above, I would say above the line, those are, outperforming. And there's one that's at 12,500 or so below the line.
Hmm.
If you go down, yeah, well, that's the one we saw already.
Yeah, we're
So we
just
knew
we're
that
just
was
gonna pick
expensive.
on pick
Yeah,
on
we're gonna pick
Legacy
on them.
Monster. Yeah,
Sorry about them.
yeah.
Yeah. So then, and then there's indeed. So
Hmm.
it's yeah. I think the line. This is interesting because the line, of best fit for predicting things is one purpose, but for kind of identifying distance from the line,
Hmm.
um, is super interesting. You've got a whole bunch of them, low spend but below the line down there. It's a good way to, I think, um, organize this.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I like how this turns out.
and it points to the really the final part about this too, which is that once you've done this analysis, it's not just a pretty picture. It's not just a, cool, I made a dashboard. This is pretty easy to act upon. If say you're spending money on sources down here and you can reallocate it to sources up here, you should do that. And you can really quickly say, here's how people analytics, this analysis can pay for itself. This is how people analytics is reallocating our money better. Or if you reach out to some of the sources below the line, I have seen it happen. They might just have a more flexible offer for you next year to keep your business if the value is not quite there at the price point. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and you can. I mean, and then it's in dollars and cents, and you can actually start working your way toward a little bit of financial modeling. And as a quick win,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the data is generally in one place for the applications, and then a quick spreadsheet for the cost.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got two things you can put together and start to help a recruiting organization make some really good decisions to support the business. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. And as
quick
a
win
quick
stuff.
win, yeah, this checks all the boxes for me. I'll summarize
Yeah,
it in a
yeah,
blog post. We'll share the link out there. I also have
cool.
another video where I go through all the math, but yeah, the data's pretty minimal. You don't need to work too hard to get it. It's not overly sensitive. So you can present it easily. It's dollars and cents and you can act upon it right away. So it's a great place to start.
Awesome. Love it.
Cool. Thanks for sharing your coffee break with me, Nick.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
Hope you enjoy the rest of it. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. See you. Cheers.
See ya. All right. Yeah. And action. Thank you.